Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
All right, welcome to the show. And this week's guest, oh my goodness, he's number one, has a super sense of humor. It's ever since I've met Kirk. We laugh. It's kind of like, when you find a person that laughs at the same crazy stuff that you laugh at. You're sitting at a dinner or at an event, and nobody could possibly be thinking what you're thinking. Kirk is usually thinking what I'm thinking. He is an experienced business attorney focused towards legal strategies for startups and entrepreneurs. He is the business attorney that most of the business guys that I know go to. Graduate from University of Tulsa, TU, and has been named as Oklahoma Rising Star. And also, I didn't know this until today, was also labeled super lawyers, if you know about that. So super lawyers for 2 years in a row. Please welcome to the show this week, Kirk Schauer. Kirk, are you there?
Hello, Clarence. I'm here. Thank you.
Excellent. How's that for an intro, man?
That's a little bit of pressure. That should be funny.
It is great.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, brother. Thank you for actually taking time. That's what we were talking before the show, and I thought, man, I hope I hope court doesn't, pull you away, because that happens, right?
Yeah. Well, it's going to be awkward when you get the invoice.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's like return to sender.
No, happy to. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So tell us about Schauer and Fett Keller. Is it Fett Keller or is it H?
That's right. Yeah, you nailed it.
My goodness. Okay, cool. You're supposed to practice these things anyway first, but tell us about your law firm and how you're helping your clients.
Sure. Jesse and I partnered up a little over 3 years ago now, and we focus on entrepreneurs, people starting a business, and then the majority of our clients then are those companies that we have helped get off the ground that have ongoing contract issues, licensing things, have new ideas they need to protect. But we focus on people structuring their business, protecting their ideas, and love working with everyone from the person with the idea out of the garage to mid-size, multi-million-dollar manufacturers and everything in between.
Do you have a favorite of one of your services that you help people with?
I love the business formation, and I would say probably especially when it is a multi-member or a family business situation. Just the hearing why they're pursuing what they're pursuing and helping them put a structure in place that is aligned with that avoids issues in the future. But I gravitate towards folks that are getting started and need some help at that initial stage.
And when you say you have experience, firsthand experience with a family business, I know.
Right. Right.
Tell us about that.
Sure. My dad, when I was late elementary school and middle school, he invented a product called the Hang Safe Hook. It's a safety coat hook for schools and churches, of all things, and grew it from our family garage to a mid-sized manufacturer that sells them all over the country and several other countries. But he was that guy in the garage with an idea and grew it. And so I was able to work with him directly for several years in between undergrad and law school. And then, of course, as a child of an entrepreneur, you're child labor as well. So we saw kind of the every side of the business, and then was able to help be a part of it and grow it. And now several of the brothers are involved, and it's a family business, and so that's why I enjoy working with our small businesses, and especially family businesses, is seeing that firsthand.
So you can help me figure out how to use child labor.
Exactly. Right. Maximize the free labor while you can.
Right. So some of the advantages that you see, that people have when they're forming, I know there's just tons of probably advantages. I know when I started my business, I did not form my business, in any kind of legal way. I just started working and taking checks.
Yeah.
Do a lot of people start that way?
It's very common, and we see that quite often, and folks can grow, in quote, say, businesses that can be a substantial size before they say, I think I need to go ahead and put some structure into this. And it's understandable, because you're feeling out if an idea is going to pick up, if someone's going to grab onto your services, what's really there, and people are focused on growing that, and then they handle some of the structural things. So that's very, very common.
What do you think are some of the myths that people have about, because I had my own until I think it was my accounting guy that said, do not take another check in your name. You're crazy. What are some of the myths that you find that are out there when it comes to forming a business correctly and the structure?
Yeah, I think an assumption that it is complex, or that it will be an arduous process to put into place, or an expensive process. Those are kind of the hurdles that we see. Time is a big one. Folks are building, and setting aside the time to do that is difficult. Something that I see quite often, and it's kind of a psychological thing, but there's a concern oftentimes that this is a level of commitment that maybe, I know my idea is getting traction. I know I'm making money at it, but as soon as I take that step of forming the business, I'm fully committed to this. And sometimes there's a mental thing there, and I, enjoy kind of diving into what, why are we holding back on some of these structural things? And then there's an assumption that if I put this business structure in place, well, now I'm committed to offering these goods or these services, or doing it this way. And that's a misconception, because there's still if done right, a significant amount of flexibility to accommodate as you go forward, as you feel out exactly how you're going to do what you do. So those are what I see as some of the common hurdles in people taking that step.
Cool. So I say, and I was confronted with this, was, okay, sure. I feel like I need to get some structure in here, an LLC, an MNOP, or whatever I need this to be. What are some of the obstacles that you see people have when it comes to either doing it myself or hiring an attorney? Because that was a decision that had to be made.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's there, and I saw this firsthand. In fact, it was one of the reasons that I wanted to go to law school, was to help entrepreneurs, people with an idea that are just looking for help. I saw, unfortunately, one side of it where, my dad's trying to get something off the ground and growing something, and time and again, some of the professionals that you would seek help from are people that they have not put themselves out there before and starting a business, growing something on their own. They've essentially just always traded their time for money. And then they're explaining to someone who is building something all the reasons why you can't do something, you shouldn't do something, or how it's not going to work. And that was baffling to me. And so we try to take the opposite approach, where we find a way to make it work for them. And so to your question, it's a people maybe have had those experiences or assume the way that I want to do this and envision doing this, once I sit down with an attorney, it's going to be, shredded up and I won't be able to. And so that's a misconception that we try to alleviate out of the gate. But, your ideas, your business, your vision for what you're going to grow, it's so personal. And we understandably are guarded about that, or guarded about criticism of it, or someone that would just say, you can't do this or it's ill-advised. And so obviously if something is going to be illegal or cause problems that way, we give people all the options and explain that. But otherwise, we try to find a structure and a way to help them pursue that.
That's cool. Because I was given a checklist of things that I needed to do to get this LLC or whatever in the beginning done, of certificate of fictitious name and bank accounts and all of this. And, I thought I didn't have the money to hire anyone at that point. But it's when you get halfway through it and you're like, I think I have the money to hire someone. I have no idea if I'm doing this correctly. And then later on, fast forward, meeting you and sitting with you and doing some of the trademark work that we've done on ideas, and also in some of the organizations that I've been a part of that you have worked the formations of with. I mean, one of them, there was like 13 of us?
At least.
In that business. And just seeing how you handle that. And there's, I've got clients that, that use you. So when you run into these, how do you deal with, I don't even know if we can get into that, but how do you deal with having so many different personality players, or does that even come into effect? Or like how, you have so many people with different businesses and it affects people different. How do you herd those cats?
Yeah, I enjoy that aspect of it, especially in the partnership setting, whether it's 2 to, as you point out, 13 plus, they are going into business because they have certain skill sets and contributions, or maybe, money that they're putting into something. And that's why they're at the table, and they're good at what they do and how they do it. What we like to do is come along and help them ask the right questions that will alleviate something popping up 6 months in or a couple years in, and help them think about it. But from a practical, it's good for an operational standpoint. Who's going to be handling which aspects of this? And if X, Y, or Z happens, what happens? And it's not uncommon that after our first meeting, the folks need to either reconvene and talk through certain things, or usually they say a couple times, well, I didn't think about that. And they learn more about each other through that process. And that's the time to learn those things and to plan for them and to build around it, versus when either the partnership is going great, you're making a lot of money, or things aren't working out, or there's a challenge. You don't want to be having those conversations then and not having those pieces in place. So it's asking the right questions and helping them mold something that meets all of those needs. And I can only think of a couple of scenarios where those questions resulted in them drastically changing what they wanted to do or how they wanted to do it, but they were very grateful for that. You'd rather have your own business and be working with someone at in kind of you each have your own business and you're strategically aligned versus being in partnership with someone that you shouldn't have been a partner with to begin with.
That's great. And by the way, I am going to need to reach out to you after this. I was speaking with my sister, called me yesterday, and she has homeschooled all of her, she had like 4 children. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think I've got them all. 4 children, and so well to the point that my nephew is 16 years old, and he just started his freshman year of college. And so all of her kids are like on this fast track, and people are starting to come to her and want to hire her for her curriculum and all this. And we were talking, and of course I'm thinking, you should start an online course, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And of course she wasn't understanding that, how does this, she's very brick and mortar mind. And so she's like, well, I'm thinking about opening this tutoring place with this lady that is in Houston with her, but I would like to do an online course. How would that, who's the boss and all? She's going down this road. And I'm like, well, first of all, I don't want anything to do with the brick and mortar stuff. That's not, that is not my wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. And I have no idea how things would work, but they would be structured right. And in the whole of my mind, I'm thinking Kirk. But you can work that out for us, right? To where I don't want to have anything to do with.
Yeah. So that's certainly something in our wheelhouse. And it brings up something else, to one of your earlier questions on, oftentimes people think, I need this entity in place. I need to build a business to protect myself from liability. That's one of the most commonly understood reasons for having your own entity is I've got a shield for liability. But that I see really a lot more practical benefits of having that entity in place, especially for someone who is new to having their own business, putting themselves out there that way. It is a good physical reminder of the business is separate from me. It's its own entity. And then all of a sudden you start thinking about things which I think are beneficial from a business standpoint in that, okay, the business has its own bank account. How much money is coming in and going out? Where does it need to be? I'm signing contracts on behalf of the business. This business is separate. As personal as business and our ideas are, there's so many benefits to understanding where that separation lies as well. And, it's kind of the thing all entrepreneurs have to wrestle with. And I hear so many of them, once they came to that realization that, hey, I've got to treat this as its own thing and it's got to grow on its own, it's got to build on its own, other things start falling into place. And so just that mental separation that happens, especially with people that are new to this whole realm, I think is as valuable, if not more valuable than, some of the well-known benefits of asset protection and all of those things.
That's great. That's great. I think my main concern was protecting myself from my sister.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You want Thanksgiving dinner to be okay, Absolutely.
It's, all of the benefits of family business, which is we can talk about business at the dinner table. I know what your strengths are. I can be more direct with you. I know what your level of commitment is. You're looking at this in the long term. All of those things. There are some significant potential downsides, and that's one area I love working with clients on. How do we bring the second generation into this? How do we make sure siblings know what the ground rules are so issues are avoided? And oftentimes, one a meeting where decisions are made and things are put into place, what that can head off down the road are significant, and people can focus on the things that they need to. Because you're right, you come into especially a family business with everything that predated that, and it's I've been in meetings where someone brought up that time your sister stole that from you when you were 10 years old, and it has nothing to do with the new venture, but that's what we come into it with, and so using all the tools that we can to make that those past not impact the business or what you guys are putting into it's key. But it takes the right questions to hash that out, and that way everybody can have Thanksgiving.
Man, were you on that Hobby Lobby tour with us?
I was, yeah.
How about that as far as,
yeah.
And we're talking about, we went to Hobby Lobby and spent some time with Mark Green, and he told us about one thing that stuck out to me was that every month, all of the greens, when you talk about different generations, I think you have to be 16 years old in order to go to the monthly family meeting there. And they, discuss things like who to donate or what organizations to donate to and all that stuff. But what jumped out with what you were just talking about was having those businesses that go for generations. And isn't it something like, there's an astounding number of businesses that just fail when it comes to that second generation, right?
Right. I believe it's 10% make it through, survive the second generation.
Wow.
And it's like 3% or less to the third. And rarely is it market influences that cause that. And that meeting was incredible, and I think I've quoted Mark quite a few times in client meetings since then, just in their approach to it and how inclusive. Not everybody in the second or third generation works for the business, but it's still, they find ways for it to be include. They have not lost the family element because of, even though they have this highly successful, very large business that so many of them are involved in. And that's one thing that I've talked to a lot of family businesses about, is especially when you have a high percentage of the family that's involved in the business, it's very easy for the business to be the topic at the dinner table, and for it to be, it's a part of the family's DNA. But if all the siblings aren't involved, what are the other things that tie us together? And what stood out to me with the Greens is, I don't know if he said this, but something along these lines, and I genuinely believe it. If the family business were to go away tomorrow, they would have some central tenets and things that would tie them together and wouldn't change the trajectory of what they do and how they do it. And that's, I think, key for families. And you have to have those overarching things. Helps your business, but I think more importantly, the business isn't the family.
Yeah. I think I did get that from him too. So what are we talked about some of them, but what are some of the pitfalls and common mistakes that you see business owners make when they're forming their business, and how can they avoid them?
Yeah. So most states, if you file for a limited liability company, which is the typical business entity that attorneys suggest and accountants suggest, just because of the flexibility and the ease of operating from year to year. Most states don't require you to also have an operating agreement, which is like your bylaws. So you can register and create an LLC and it be valid and usable without those bylaws. So many businesses, and I've seen, larger businesses even, they don't have an operating agreement, or someone found one online. They said, this is good enough, and stuck it back in the drawer and haven't revisited it. And so I think using that opportunity to have an operating agreement that really does match what you do and how you want to do it, and having that personally crafted, because again, it's something that you can amend, you can change, but having something that's not cookie cutter, or something that's just a template, I think can be problematic, and we see a lot of issues with that, especially if you have multiple people involved, or just not having one in place at all is problematic. So that's one thing. I think deferring decisions like that and discussions like that out of a concern that it's going to be time consuming, it's going to be expensive, all the things we talked about before. So those are the big pitfalls I see. Okay,
cool. I know you shared quite a few stories with me over the the times that we've been together. Can you kind of share an example of how you've helped maybe a client overcome those obstacles and succeed in getting a business structured the way
Sure.
that helped?
Yeah, I think one, and this is, we've seen this happen a couple of times, but one that stands out to me is, two partners. They both had a skill set, and that was going to be their contribution to a new venture. And ironing out, it's hard sometimes to, if one person's putting money in and one person's putting skill sets in, or maybe they're both just putting their services in, how do we define that so that, say a year in, we don't get into a situation where, my contribution's more valuable or I'm the one that's really making this grow, things like that. You want to avoid that. And so when you define and everyone understands that, as long as we're both doing X, Y, and Z, we're still partners at this percentage. And so we had some partners that had been operating with some success, but some of those concerns were popping up and getting to the point where, each had reached out to me and had concerns about, even continuing in the partnership, or they'd be better separating, which would have been just an expensive, hairy, and I think terrible experience for each of them, and neither of them that would have ended up with anything or the ability to go forward. And so we were able to walk them through that process of both what's working, what's not working, what we need to communicate and put into place. And they did that, and the traction just from the operational side, from having those discussions and putting those pieces in place. And I think more importantly, not having to be guarded or protected going forward, because they've already decided it and it's settled, was huge. And so, and then, another example would be we have some clients that started out as a small group and grew, and new investors came on. And so amending operating agreements, offering new rounds of ownership, some of those more complex structures are fun as well, because it's, when you see something growing and new people wanting to be a part of it and people's investments paying off, that's enjoyable. And with some of those businesses, and we get to reclassify, identify the ideas that you have, what needs to be in its own entity, and kind of separating some of those things out. But those are the two that kind of immediately come to mind that I think significantly helped them and helped them grow and gave them peace of mind and allow them just to focus on what they're good at.
Man, Kirk, I have heard you use the words fun and enjoyable all throughout this conversation when speaking about these incredibly complex situations. At what point, you told us that you got started, with the family business, but at what point, maybe through school or whenever, did you realize that this was the thing that you wanted to do that inspired you to just keep going? Because, I mean, it's pretty tough to become an attorney.
Right. It was undergrad. I went to college at a small private school in Springfield, Missouri, called Evangel University, and I had just a wonderful professor and advisor, and he I had mentioned to him a few times I was thinking about law school, and a lot of that grew out of seeing what my dad was going through and growing the business, and just seeing, there's an opportunity for someone to, if you're willing to come alongside entrepreneurs, there's ample need out there. And so he encouraged me to pursue that, and so I did. He said, the benefit is if you're going to law school, you can spend undergrad studying something that you're interested in, and that was a load off for me because I was at that point a secondary education major, but they had a practicum in a middle school class, and so that was an eye-opening experience to realize, this is not going to work. So middle schoolers will chew you up and spit you out. So, for me, law school was the easier path. So
Right.
Kudos to teachers, especially middle schoolers. So I decided that was the route, and finished up with the government degree, and I did take 2 years to in between undergrad and in law school. One year was deliberate to work on the family business, and the second year I was had met my wife, and but I needed another year to talk her into marrying me, and so that was the second year, and so she agreed, and then we moved down to Tulsa, and I started law school.
That's awesome. Can you share a lesson that maybe you learned early on that still impacts how you do your business today?
I would say saying yes to the right things and no to the right things. It's there's some of the things that you should pass on, or maybe you should pass on, are usually just close enough to something that is interesting to you, or that you think would be a good opportunity. And so having a good process, and maybe even a kind of a key group of people that you run certain things through is important. So knowing what to pass on, and that could be anything from a business opportunity to an area of service you provide, or a specific client, just anything along those lines. So being deliberate about that, I wouldn't think that would be something that you have to be just super mindful of, and maybe I should have been, that should have been more top of the mind. And I can say I haven't made any decisions that I just hugely regret, but I think being mindful of that from the beginning is good.
Man, and the more successful you get, the more opportunities that come your way, right?
Sure, absolutely.
People ask you to be on podcasts and stuff. So we talk about a lot today. What do you feel like is the most important question that business owners should ask themselves when they're considering about forming a business?
I would say get to the why of what your business is. That's incredibly helpful when you're meeting with an attorney or an accountant, is you having a clear picture of your why. And then that helps us as attorneys know from a structural standpoint, or the pieces that need to be in place. And then I think from a practical standpoint, if you're clear on your why with yourself, then you can define that why for people that come along beside you, or that work with you, or that you hire, or your spouse. And so that's clear with all of them. And then also they understand what to say to remind you when things get hard, or there's difficulties of what your why is, and you have that support. But I'd say understanding your why of your business, of your idea, what your vision for it is. And I'd say that's the important question.
Okay, cool. And so we're going to roll forward, and then the question that we need to be asking when we're considering evaluating an attorney is what?
I'd say, experience is key, and both their legal experience and the type of help that you need, whether it's business formation or litigation or something along those lines. So the experience, I say legal experience and non-legal experience. We like to explain to clients, or clients understand that we've been involved in things outside of the legal realm. We understand the ups and downs of starting a business and putting yourself out there that way. I think that is helpful. And if you find an attorney that has that, that's a huge plus. And then, especially with larger firm, what's that attorney's role going to be? What aspects are they still going to be hands-on with? What questions, if you have follow questions or minor things that come up, are they the one that's going to be answering that, or is that going to be delegated? Those type of things. So making sure that it aligns with what your expectations are on access and availability. And, for us, that goes to relationship, and our philosophy is we're in it for the long haul with clients. So we love forming the business, but we're prideful of the fact that our clients use us when there's a dispute that arises, or there's licensing things or things that come up down the road. So if you're interested, or if that's your intent with an attorney, seeing if that's how they approach it as well. And many firms that's also their approach, but some, they just focus on one aspect of it. And so knowing that going in is good.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you can go ahead and send me the invoice. I appreciate your time.
No.
Gladly pay it. You give
no.
so much great information, man. I just feel so honored that sometimes when I get to go on these trips and I get to talk with you,
Oh, no, it's mutual.
It's awesome. So how can someone find out more about Kirk Schauer?
Sure. Our website is 918legal.com, and we went for that instead of showerandfetkeather.com. So go to 918legal.com, and more details on us there, how to get a hold of us. And we have a Facebook page as well that we try to keep updated with helpful information. But and our phone number is 918-938-7300.
Awesome. Well, give Kirk a call. And I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg of what he shared with you today. And until next week, we'll keep playing, and eventually you'll own the block.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.